Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make this Monochrome Kisses beaded Kumihimo bracelet. And this is the one that I've made here. So you can see we have these X's all the way along, but in this monochrome effect we're just using black and white beads, but using them opposite. So if you look on the back here, this is what the actual Kumihimo braid looks like. So I made different sections, the black and the white, and then on the front of the piece I've used the opposite colour beads there to make the X's with, to make them stand out more. You get this monochrome effect, and then I've added these bicones on the edges to give it a nice sparkle and make it lovely and elegant as well. And I finished it off using these Kumihimo ends and attaching my findings, so my lobster claw clasp and extended chain. And this is then what it looks like on. So you get that nice monochrome effect with all the excess because we're just using those black and white beads. But then it's still nice and comfortable to wear because on the inside you just have the plain braid, whereas on the top is the only place where we added those extra beads. So obviously that's for the embellishment. And then as for the length of the braid here, now the length of the beaded part is about 6.5 inches long. And then obviously I've attached these findings here, so different clasps will then add different lengths depending what you choose to use. But you can always make the beaded part shorter or longer just following the pattern. So this is what it looks like. So if you want to learn how to make this bracelet, then stay tuned. So these are the materials that we're going to need. First of all, here I have my round Kumihimo disc because it's a round braid structure that we're making. And then as for the cord that I'm using, it's this 0.4mm S-lon for the braid. Now I'm using a black colour just because I wanted to match some of the beads that I'm using in case any of it shows through the braid. But you can really use either black or white cord. And then as for the beads, I'm using these AO Miyuki seed beads. So I've got a black colour and a white colour to achieve that monochrome effect. And then I'm also using these SuperDuos, again in black, that's also going to go into the braid. And once we've then made the braid, I'm using these 15O seed beads, again in black and white for that monochrome effect, to add in the embellishment, and also these 4mm bicone beads. They're just a jet black but with AB coating on them. Obviously you can kind of combine your colours however you want to. And to be able to add these beads in after we make the braid, I'm using these beading needles along with this S-lon cord. So this is a size D, and again I just chosen a black colour to match with the other cord. And I'm then going to use these Kumihimo ends here to finish off the ends of the braid, so I can then use my findings to attach to that little loop in them. So for that I'm using a lobster claw clasp and extended chain, and I'm then going to use the jump rings to attach it together. So let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. So then the lengths of cord that we're going to need is 4 lengths here of our S-lon for the braid, of about 1 meter each. So what we're going to then do is I make sure all the ends are even, because I then want to fold them over in half to put the ends together, because we need to find the midpoint. So something like that. Then I tie a knot where the midpoint is just to hold them together, and I just put a piece of scrap wire around that knot here to help pull it down through the disc. So that now means that the 4 lengths that we cut turn into 8 working lengths for the braid. So now I've attached the cords here onto my disc, and I just have that knot with a piece of scrap wire coming down through the hole in the center. Then I distributed the rest of the cords on the disc like this, so I just use the dots here for reference. I'm not using the numbers. I just put 1 cord on either side of each dot there, so we have pairs opposite each other, 4 pairs all the way around. And then we need to start making the braid first of all, so I'm going to make a little section of braid before we add in beads. So what I'm going to do is take my top left cord here, release that from the slot, then bring it down into the slot right to the left of the bottom ones, so I'm staying on the same side of the disc. If you kind of imagine you have a line down through the center, then I take the bottom right one, release that, and then bring that up and stay on the right side of the top cord there. So again, we now still have 2 pairs opposite each other, they've just slightly moved on the disc. Now I'm going to turn my disc for the next pair, so about 1/4. And then again take the top left one, bring that down, and then the bottom right one and bring that up. Then I turn my disc another 1/4 there to get to the next pair, and basically you just keep repeating this, so the top left one down and then the bottom right one up, and just do this until you have about 1 to 2 centimeters of braid. So now I have that little section here, you can see the braid starts to come out of the back. Then it's time to start adding in the beads. So I've now added all the beads onto the lengths of cord here, and this is then what the setup looks like. And then as you can see here, on some of the links we only have 8 O's, but on 2 of them here we also have SuperDuos along with the 8 O's. So as for the links with just the 8 O's on, the pattern on them are all the same. So as you can see here, what we do is start out with 2 blacks, then 2 whites, 2 black, 2 white, and it just alternates like that all the way to the end. And there's a total of 46 beads on each of them. Now as for the 2 lengths with SuperDuos here, we also alternate between the colours, but we just have a single black and a single white, single black and single white, but then in between each of the 8 O's we have 1 SuperDuo. And in total there's 22 SuperDuos on each of them. Now if you'd want your braid to be a bit shorter than this, then you can easily do that by taking off some of the beads on all the lengths of cord. So for instance here, according to the pattern, what I would then do is for instance take off those last 2 little sections, so the last black one and the last white one, again to make sure it still finishes on a black one there. So we have the start and the finish with the same colour, but you can take those 2 off and make sure you take the same amount of beads off on all of them. And also this setup of the beads is made to accommodate for the way that I work with my braid. So as you saw in the beginning, I start with my top left one, bring that down, then I take the bottom right one and bring that up. So if you work the same way as me and you start with either the top left one or even if you start with the bottom right one, because they're the same as each other, then you can just set up the beads just like this. But if you do the opposite and you start with the top right one or the bottom left one, because again they're the same as each other, then you want to just set up your beads a bit differently. And what that is basically in a mirrored image. So imagine that you have a mirror in front of the disc and then you want to set the beads up in that mirrored image. Now what that means is the top 2 here, the beads on the cord, so obviously it's not the cord, it's just the beads, they would swap over. Now in this case, on a lot of the cords here, on some of them, the top ones and the bottom ones, it doesn't matter because they're the same anyway, but just in principle. And also the bottom ones here, the beads would swap places. On the side here, what you need to do is the top ones, the beads on those cords would swap with each other, and then the bottom ones would swap over the middle with each other as well. And then you set up the beads in that way and you can make the same braid and get the same effect, but if you work in the opposite way. But once you then got all your beads loaded onto your cords, it's time to start adding them into the braid. So what you want to do is just continue making the braid in the same way as the beginning there. The only difference is that every time we move a cord now, we're also going to add in 1 bead. So again, my next cord here that I'm due to take is this top left one. I'm going to release that, and as I'm doing that, I'm also dropping down 1 bead, letting that fall all the way into the middle, and then make sure it goes underneath the cord here that's going out to the side. And if it doesn't do that by itself, just tuck it in with your fingers. And then place the cord down in the slot. Now the bottom right one, I'm going to take next. As I release the cord, I'm also dropping down 1 bead right in there to the middle. Make sure it goes underneath the cord that's going out to the side. And then you just turn your disc for the next pair and do the same thing. So basically every time I move a cord, we just add in 1 bead. And you just need to make sure, the most important thing, is that the beads go underneath the cords in the middle there, going out to the side, and they stay there. So just, if you need to, tuck them in with your finger, and also make sure they stay down there, because that's how we end up with the beads on the outside of the braid. Whereas if you make your braid and a bead ends up over on top of the cord going out to the side instead of under, then what will happen is it'll end up inside of the braid, which is also a technique, but obviously that's not what we want for this one. So you always want to make sure that they're tucked underneath, and then you bring the cord over. And you just keep going like this until you've added in all the beads. And also it's the exact same thing for the SuperDuos. You just add them in the same way, and they will usually naturally sit with the open hole that hasn't been used sticking out and away from the braid. So now that I don't have any more beads left to use here, I've added them all into my braid. Then what we just want to do is finish off this end the same way that we started out. So make that little end of the braid with just the cord. So all you do is just continue braiding here in the same way. And then you'll find that the braid and the cords here on the end will naturally singe in. And then you do that for the same length as the beginning. So now that we made the full braid here, what I'm then going to do is to secure the end in place so we can take the cords off of the disc without the end of the braid coming undone. So what I'm going to do is go to the pair that I was due to use next, so not the pair that I just used but the opposite one, and then just take cords that are diagonally opposite each other here, release them and then bring them over the middle and tie a knot with them, just right down at the end of the braid. leave them to the side, and then take the other two from the same pair. Again, tie a knot with them. So just gradually kind of tying knots and securing the end. I'm going to go to the other pair and just do the same thing. Take cords opposite each other first of all. Make a knot with them over the middle. And then I take the last ones and again just make a knot, and because these are the last ones I always like to make a double knot. So I'm just going to tie the first knot here and then just straight away tie another one, just because then it won't come undone as much. If you just tie a single one, it's going to pretty much come undone much easier by just kind of moving the braid around, but this secures it better. And also by finishing it off like this, we haven't added too much bulk to the end there. And this is then what the braid looks like when it's off the disc and it's completely done. You can see we have those sections of the black and the white beads alternating all the way, and then the SuperDuos on either side there, kind of in rows like that, just sticking out from the braid, which is obviously what we're going to use as well to add our embellishment with. Now on this end here, I've got all the excess cord, so all I'm going to do on this is just put some glue around the ends and then cut off the excess. And then here I'm just going to remove my length of wire there. And then we have the braid ready for the next step. So then we need to cut a length of our thread so we can start adding in the other beads. Now it's really up to you what you prefer to work with, but I've cut off about a wingspan of my thread here. And then on either end I've put a needle. And then I've also pulled through a decent tail and made sure they're about even. So obviously we use the thread here pretty evenly. And then we're going to just attach this now to our braid. So I then get my braid ready, and then I take one of my needles first of all, and we just want to attach the thread to an end without beads on. So all I'm going to do is just take my needle and go straight through the braid. And then I just take the other needle and put them together, just again to make sure it's about even. And then pull it all the way so about the middle ends up down there on the braid. And then I just want to take, again, one needle, separate them out. And then we need to go back and forth through the braid a few times just to kind of secure it in place. So literally just move a bit to the side, go back again, and then go a bit to the side again. And then just do this until you feel like it's pretty nice and secure, and then we can start moving up towards the beads. So once I've attached my thread and I have both ends set up further towards the beads, what I've done is I've just made sure that one thread is coming out on one side just below that very first bead, that's the furthest down, and on the other side the other one is coming out on the opposite bead just below it there, because then what we need to do is start taking our thread through the beaded part as well, because we need to basically get to the very first SuperDuo to be able to add in our embellishment beads. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming out just below that bead there, and I need to go actually just straight through the bead. So I'm not going through the cord or anything, just the beads themselves, and I'm going through those two kind of at an angle there. If you can get through both of them, you might as well do that. So we're then coming out through the bead and the braid that's right opposite that first SuperDuo, and you just have a pair there of beads in the braid next to each other in between them. So we need to come out from that bead, and of course we need to do the same thing on the other side to get to the other SuperDuo. So the equivalent one, and then just come straight out from that and pull your thread through. And then we have both threads and needles in that position. So now what we need to do is get in some more beads. So I'm then getting in some of those 15 OC beads, so the tiny little ones, and I'm starting out with the black ones just because on this end here, where I am, all the beads in the braid are black, and I just want this part here to blend in nicely. So then what we're going to do is just take one side at a time. So start on my right, it doesn't matter which one. And then we need to add some of these beads to our needle. So I'm adding 3 where my thread there is coming out from that bead in the braid. And then I'm just going to go straight through the outer hole in that first SuperDuo and pull it all the way through. And then you're going to see that they sit just perfectly, basically covering up the thread so we don't have any bare thread showing. And then of course, you take the other needle and do the same thing with that one. So add the 3 beads and then go through the outer hole in that SuperDuo in the braid on that side as well, because then we get a nice seamless transition. And now we're ready to add in the X's. So because this first section here where I'm going to add an X, the beads in the braid are white, I'm going to use the black ones of the tiny ones to make this X to begin with, because obviously we want that contrast to be able to see it. So on both needles, one at a time, we need to add 5 of the little seed beads. Just get them down the thread a little bit, and then add 5 on the other one as well. 3, 4, and 5. And then we have both of them here with beads on. Then I need to add one more to either one of them and keep that separate. Pull it down the thread a little bit and then go through the same bead with the other needle in the opposite direction. So we're crossing through it basically, and then you can just pull at your threads, your needles here, and pull it all the way down, and then they're going to meet right there in the middle. So you can see this is basically 1/2 of the X, and that bead that we cross through is kind of that connection point. So that's the 1/2. Then we need to just add 5 beads on either needle again to be able to make the other half. 4 and the 5th one. Bring them down, and then I'm just adding 5 on the other one as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the last one, 5. And then we just take one needle at a time, the one that's coming out towards the right side now. I'm going to go through the next SuperDuo in the braid. Again, the outer hole that hasn't been used, with that needle, and pull that through. And as I'm pulling it, I just like to kind of pull the first half tight first, and then bring the threads over the beads here towards the top, and kind of it helps putting your finger on it, otherwise the beads can get a little bit mixed up, just to make sure they're separated nicely, and we'll get that X shape. And obviously on the other side, you want to take the other needle through that SuperDuo to get the final bit of the X. And just make sure it's not tangled or anything, and pull it through. Then you can pull it tight to make sure we get that X shape and all the beads are sitting correctly, because if any of them, especially in the middle there, are kind of mixed up a bit or crossing over under each other the wrong way, you want to make sure you kind of correct it as you go, while we still can adjust it, because obviously once you've gone through all of it, we can still go back through and tighten it all, but not once we obviously finish things off. So you just make sure you kind of do this along the way. And now we basically just add in the next X in the same way, but obviously because I want this monochrome look and I want to alternate between them, this next section in the braid is black, so that means I need to bring in the white tiny little seed beads and use them instead. And you just go straight into adding your X. So 5 seed beads on both needles, 5 on each. 2, 3, 4, and the 5th one. Bring them down so I can then take one more on either one of them and then cross through that one with the other needle. And then we get the first half of this X, and you can see straight away the contrast, because obviously now it's the white little beads on top of the black background. And then we just have to make the other half of it. So add 5 again on both needles. 5 on that, and then also 5 on the other one. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we just take one needle at a time through the SuperDuo in the braid, the outer hole, on the side that the thread is coming out towards. And again, like before, I just like kind of pulling the first half tight and making it sit correctly, and then I pull the thread through the SuperDuo and tighten it up. And the other side. Same thing, get thread caught up a bit here I think, and then just pull it so it tightens up. And we'll then get the complete X again. So there we go. So obviously right now the X's are a little bit kind of tight in the look, but once you wear this it'll open up a bit and it'll look even more like an X. So this is how you just keep going, obviously alternating between the colours, making sure you're using the opposite colour than the colours in the section there in the braid. So now I reach the other end, then you can see the threads are now coming out from those very last SuperDuos, and what I just want to show you is how I like to tighten them. So what I do is I go in, I kind of like to do this along the way as well, but also at the end obviously. I grab hold of both of the threads with one hand, and then I take my needle, whichever one, and then I start to go in underneath an X, maybe where I start to feel it's a bit loose, and then I kind of lift it up, pull it tight, and I go to the next one up, and I keep doing that all the way to where I'm holding the threads, and then you can usually feel if there's a bit of loose thread. By the time you get up here, it pulls through down to your hand, and then that tightens it up nicely, and then it looks like that. So now what we need to do is obviously kind of finish off this end here in the same way that we started off in the other end. So I'm just going to get some of my black little 15-0s out again, and then my braid here on the end, we're coming out from those last SuperDuos, and it's the same on both sides, and we're basically just doing the exact same thing as we did in the beginning, obviously just in reverse because we're now kind of going to finish it off, at least this middle part. So we're coming out from that SuperDuo, then I'm going to add 3 of my seed beads, and then we need to go through that bead in the braid that's right opposite the SuperDuo. And you might as well just go through the next bead as well. Again, just to kind of cover up that thread, bridging the gap. And make sure you keep pulling this tight as you're going through the ends here as well. And do the exact same thing on the other side as well. And then all you want to do is get both your threads down to the cord part again, go through that a few times, and then make your way back up through the same path. Again, get a thread to either side, and get through that first SuperDuo, and then obviously we need to come down through the sides in the opposite direction here. So now I made my way back around here with my threads coming out of those SuperDuos there. So now what I just want to mention as well is that if you work with a shorter thread, because you're not too comfortable working with this long one, then you can always just finish off your thread down here on the end in the same way that I'm going to do right at the end, and start out a new one. That's completely up to you. There's no harm in doing that. It's going to work just fine. I'm just going to keep using the same one here though. Then what we want to do is add the embellishment on this side. And to do that, again, I'm going to bring in some more beads. So again, I'm getting my 15-0 seed beads in. I'm using the black ones just because I want it to blend in nicely with also the bicones that I'm going to be using. Obviously, again, you can combine yours however you want to. Then, I have my thread and needle ready. Coming up from that first SuperDuo, then all we're going to do is I'm just going to start on one side, add one 15-0, one bicone and one 15-0, then jump straight over to the next SuperDuo and go through that outer hole. Make sure you only go through the SuperDuo and you don't grab any of the other 15-0s in the excess. So we're just going straight through the SuperDuos there, and then as you pull that tight, the bicone is going to end up sitting right on the edge, basically in between the legs on that X there. And then you just add another 15-0 bicone and 15-0. I'll throw it out of the way and then jump to the next SuperDuo and avoid the 15-0s in the excess and pull it tight, and they're going to sit perfectly just in between like that. And obviously you want to do the exact same thing on the other side. So one seed bead, one bicone and one seed bead, and go through the SuperDuo. Now what you can do, and what I personally prefer to do, is do a few at a time on say one side, and then go to the other side and do a few, and kind of swap a bit from side to side. But that's completely up to you, it's just how I prefer doing it, and it's going to look a bit something like that. So you can see it's going to really add that kind of, in this case, sparkle and a bit of extra embellishment to it. So just keep doing that all the way to the other end. And on this end here, you want to repeat as well, go through the end in the exact same way that we've done the whole time to get to that part with just the cord and the braid, but we then just need to finish off our thread. So now I've reached all the way to that other end there. You can see we have all those bicones on the edges. It has a really lovely bling to it, and obviously even more so with that AB coating that I have on these beads here. So then on this end, like I said, we just need to finish off the threads. So it's the same with both of them. So I'm just going to take one here, and I'm just coming out of that bead first of all from the braid, but then I just need to go through the corded part, and I just kind of want to move up a little bit like that. And then first of all, we need to go through just a couple of times just to kind of fasten it. Make sure it's pulled as tight as you want it to be on the edge so we don't have any loose beads or loose thread. So it's pulled nice and tight there. And then go back and forth through this area a couple of times, just like when we started out, just to kind of help secure it in place. And then what I'm going to do is start making some knots as well, just to finish off the thread securely. So to do that, I'm going to go back through the braid again, close to where it's coming out from. But then before pulling it all the way tight, I'm just going to make sure to leave a loop here. And then I'm going to take my needle and go back through that loop. I like to go through it twice. And then as I've got my needle and thread through that, then I pull it tight so it gets brought all the way down. And then that's now created a knot. And then you just want to go through again to the opposite side, do another knot, and do this a couple of times with each thread. Now once you've made your last knot, make sure that you go through the braid a couple of times before you cut off the excess, because you just want to then cut off the excess of the thread, obviously. Because if you cut it off right by a knot, then the knot will probably come undone. But just do this with both of them, cut off the excess, and then all that's left to do is really finish off the ends. So now that I've finished off my thread here, you can see I've got rid of it on the ends. Then this is pretty much the finished braid itself. So like I said, all that's left to do is finish off the ends here, so we can actually attach our clasp as well. So all I'm going to use are these little bell-shaped Kumihimo ends, going to fit perfectly on the end of the corded part of the braid here. Obviously I'm going to use some glue. I've already got a tutorial where I show how to use them if you're not familiar with it, but then here they have a loop so I can attach my findings to that. So once you finish off both ends and attach your findings, then you have your finished bracelet. So now I've finished off the ends here, and then this is what my bracelet looks like. You can see you get those excess all the way along, but in the monochrome effect, and those lovely sparkly bicones on the edges. And then I've attached my lotto cord clasp and my extended chain. And then you can see the excess now, but then like I said, when you kind of wear this, it becomes even more obvious. It just kind of separates them just that little bit extra, and it just gives that really nice effect. So this is what mine looks like. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you so much for watching it. Please feel free to check out other ones, and I'll see you in the next one.